Hi guys, welcome to this pre-exam walkthrough. In this tutorial I tend just to go through an English language paper 2. I'm going to use the 2020 paper for this, just as a recap of kind of what to expect of the whole paper. So I'm not going to zoom in on particular questions, although I'm going to do some separate videos on those. Okay, so paper 2 we know is the writer's viewpoints and perspectives paper. I've said this before, but what I'm advising in terms of the order that you approach this paper in is as follows: question 5, which is section B, and then 1, 3, 2, 4. Now, I've talked about this before, but your section B, your writing task, is really relatively unrelated to the section A, the reading text. You're not going to, it's not going to give you any advantage to have having read that first. And in doing section B first, you know, you're fresher, your hands aren't killing, and you're more likely to not have kind of, you know, lost some time and be trying to cobble this together in the last 15 minutes of the exam. So I'd suggest it's a good idea to do this. Then question 1, question 3 we know is your language question, and very sort of straightforward. And then these two, it's just better to put them together. They both question 2 and 4 get you to look at both of the texts. And I've spoken to someone before from the exam board that talks about they quite deliberately sort of split up the order to give it a bit more challenge, whereas in actual fact it'd be much easier to have these questions together. There's a natural kind of sense if you've looked at both of them, and in question 2, and then in a more developed way with perspectives and methods you move on to question 4. So I've talked about this before. That would be definitely my advice around the order to do the exam in. Okay, so when you open your paper and you look at the insert, I would just give yourself half a minute to think about the texts that you're going to be given. Now, we know that there will always be a 19th century text on paper 2. If those of you watching are about to do the 2022 exam, we know that the paper 1 was a 20th century, and therefore we know that this exam will be the 21st century, because over the 3 exams you get a 19th, 20th and 21st, and source paper 2 will always have a 19th century. So it's either going to always be from somewhere in the 1900s or somewhere in the 2000s. But I think it's important for you to sort of consider what the text is, and therefore some likely points of view and purposes. Now, here Joe Simpson, this is his own autobiography. It's a personal account of what he did. It's going to be written, yes, for an informative purpose, but also to be entertaining. So it's likely to be quite exciting. It's likely to be quite honest. We're expecting it to be truthful because of that point of view. Now, in the second one, an extract from a letter written by explorer Gertrude Bell. Now, a letter, particularly at this time, might have a different purpose to this. It's not had the drafting and editing process to make it into a book. So perhaps a letter, you know, say you were writing home, you're doing some expedition, you're perhaps not going to go into the gritty reality, the hardships, the tough elements of it. Perhaps you want to write home and be reassuring to a family who may not know what's happening to you and may be concerned about you. So just give yourself a bit of time. So just some overall tips for this paper really is around read what you need. Your question paper, you know, we know, for example, that the language question could be about source A or it could be about source B. I would, you know, if you're going through the paper in the order that I suggest, particularly if you're looking at the language, you're doing question 1 and then question 3, just read the bit that you need. So, you know, say your language question is on source A, I wouldn't go ahead and read through both of the extracts first before going back to my language question. I'd just read source A and the bit that I need, answer that question and then move on. It just stops you getting confused. Other bits of advice is that question 3 is just the same as question 2, paper 1, a language question, marked in exactly the same way. Question 2 we know is no methods. And what we're looking for is you to sum things up with quotes and make some inferences, and then some connections, some similarities, or it could be differences. Question 4, that tricky question where you're looking to identify perspectives or points of view. You need to identify what the point of view is, back that up with evidence and methods, and then compare it. And question 5, we're aiming for 2 sides. We know on the 2022 exam that you will be being asked to write an article, and I have done a video on article writing and the techniques you could use for that, so it might be wise to have a look at it. Right, I'm just going to briefly go through this paper in terms of its questions, reminding ourselves what we need to do. So I will let you pause if you have not had access to this so that you can have a read of this paper. So this is source A, I'll just pause there. We've then got source B. I'll just run that down a bit. Sorry, we've got the second half of source A. And then I'll pause here so you can see source B. Again, I think this paper should now be available on AQA's website, but pause there and have a look if not. Right, okay, so I'm assuming now that you've had a chance to read it. Okay, so our general advice around question 1. Obviously you are looking for just to shade in a number of statements. These are the answers if you are so interested. But a reminder that if you go wrong on this, you know, if I'd inadvertently put a different one down, I thought it was this, and then I realised, it's not. Just go back over and put like a false next to it or something like that. Basically something outside the box. That means that when it's been scanned in, they'll realise, okay, the student's made a mistake there, that's fine. And you know, you can just put some true next to these ones to show these are the ones I really want marking, and that'll get flagged up. So we don't need to spend, it's out of 4 marks, you really should just be spending a couple of minutes. Okay, so I'm working on the assumption that you're going to follow it in the same way that I advised, which is then you're going to go and move on to the questions. Straightforward, you know what you're doing with it. Now, the difference here on paper 2, difference from paper 1, is that there is, of course, no extract printed here on the question paper. So it will require you to go and find that section yourself. So this is what I talk about, you know, read what you need. So you may well have just gone back to source A, and then you're going to say to yourself, right, this is the section that I am looking at. And so then I'm going to read over the sections that I need, I'm going to highlight the bits that I'm going to do, and then I'm going to write up my answer. Okay, and what we would look for around 12 marks, I would look for sort of 3 sustained points. I'm using P. I know lots of people use different systems or don't even like using that, and that's fine, but I'm looking for 3 developed points. Okay, so once we've done 1 and 3, just bear with me, then I would be moving on to question 2. So this is our referring to source A and source B. And, you know, the question here, which I never find hugely helpful because it makes you think summary is the key skill, is asking you to look at the difference between the 2 companions. So it could be similarities or differences in your exam. Mostly, if I'm honest, I've seen it, it's differences. And really, you know, and you can just cast your eyes briefly over my response to this, but you can see that what you need to do is sum something up in your own words, put a quote in, and use words like suggests and implies and infers to kind of read into what you've learnt about this person. Then you are looking to see how there's differences, and the way that the response, or the method I think is most straightforward for this, is to do all of source A with like all your summary, all your inference, and then source B, bringing in your differences. So it's almost like 2 chunky paragraphs. A chunky paragraph about source A, summing that up, quotes, inferences, then one about source B, and in that one we talk about the differences. Okay, so question 4. This is your comparing perspectives question, and sometimes this is worded slightly different. It could say point of view, it could say ideas. You know, perspectives just means what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how does that come across. Honestly, I try not to look at these. I just try. I don't always find them that helpful. What I find helpful for this question is just to basically identify a point of view, back it up with evidence, And if you can, with that evidence, also find methods, you know, and methods could be language, they could be structure, and then compare. So this is similar, this is different. Now this question is asking you about the differences. Again, a bit like Q2, it could be differences, it could be similarities. I would be wanting, for this question, a 16-mark question, basically 2 detailed comparisons would be enough for this. If you can do 3, great, but don't try and kill yourself to do that. So pick out your point of view. So, you know, it could be the writer feels frustrated, frightened, anxious, excited, enthusiastic. You're just trying to find emotion words, really. And then you say, like, basically, how do we know that they're feeling that way? Well, here's the quote and here's the evidence. And this is how and why it's a bit different in source B. Okay, and then I realised I didn't do this fully in the order that I wanted to. But when we move on to section B, which is your writing task, again, those of you doing the 2022 exam, it will be an article. Just take a moment to think about what's the form and the genre. It's going to be on a news website, so that might have a slightly different tone than if it's a newspaper. And in this case, you're going to argue. So if you see that, then you could use something like boxing to argue as a task. And my main tip for this is, and I say this to my class all the time, do not, so if you can hear a weird noise, it's my dog snoring, do not refer to the statement. I want you guys to imagine you've read this somewhere, you've been motivated, you think, oh, that's an interesting topic, I'm going to write an article on this topic, but I don't want anyone saying I agree with the statement above. Where would you see, think to yourselves, on a news website, where would you ever see an article that starts off, I agree with the statement above? I'd also, which I haven't done here actually, I should have done, but I would leave a gap so that you can come back if you have time to put a headline in. Something short, between 3 and 5 words, something catchy, you know, would be suitable for an article or on a news site. And then you're going to get as much in the way of technique, of vocab, and of a variety of sentence types in here. Now, I would be aiming for this 40-mark question for students to do about 2 sides or somewhere in the region of about 7 paragraphs. I've done a tutorial on boxing to argue. That's the sort of structure I would suggest. I've done a little tutorial on features of article writing, so if you've got time, have a scan over that. Remembering that technical accuracy, which is your spelling and punctuation and grammar, is important, but it's not as important as your ideas. Content and organisation is basically your ideas, your use of vocab, and your use of sort of techniques, similes, metaphors, all those kinds of things, all those different devices. That's what's really key for this question. Okay, I'm going to now do a few tutorials on the specific questions of this paper, but just to recap really, I would suggest your order is this, question 5, 1, 3, 2, 4. Really think about this paper in terms of the writers having perspectives and points of view about things, and you know, I'll just leave those tips back on at the end. Okay, thanks for watching and best of luck. Bye.